Lots to talk about, so I'll start by saying congratulations on your movie.
Thank you.
Really well done.
Thank you so much.
And easily could have been fucked up. Let's just be honest.
Well, you know, I did my best, but,
right,
yeah.
Because it's tough subject matter, because you want to portray it, you want to be accurate, you want to be honest, but, and it's your first movie.
Yeah.
Like you're not just playing like a two-hander in like a small room.
No, yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's like a seven-hander in a small room.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right, a little bit more than that. But talk a little bit about balancing. Something I'm curious about is the delicate balance of making a movie that is dealing with very real subject matter, but you're also making a movie.
Sure, yeah.
So talk a little bit about the balance of fact and fiction, and how you went about that.
Sure. Well, the way I came to it was Mary Mapes' book, and she wrote a book right after sort of all of this. She wrote this book, and it was excerpted in Vanity Fair, and I read the excerpt in Vanity Fair. I was just on a Saturday or something like that, sitting around, and I'd been looking for something to direct, and I was sort of casting around, and I'd had but like I knew some guys who were writers who had directed and to various different degrees of success, but a lot of times people don't get to direct a second movie, and so I was sort of like, if I'm only going to get one shot at this, what do I want it to be about? I want it to be something that I'm really fascinated by and interested in and that matters to me. And I read the article, and that immediately, it did that sort of thing that all sort of excerpted articles do in magazines, or they try to do, which is make you want to buy the book. So I went on Amazon, bought the book, read the book, and was just like, I was struck by how much I didn't know about something I thought I knew a lot about, which was this story, which I had sort of followed, I think kind of like everybody else had a little bit, where, I hadn't seen the initial broadcast on 60 Minutes 2, but the next day you heard about it because it blew up so quickly and so thoroughly, and was covered by everybody else so much in the kind of the 2 weeks that followed in September 2004. But I read this book and I was like, oh wow, I don't know a lot about this thing I thought I knew a lot about. And so, and I didn't know it all about Mary, which was sort of the interesting thing, which was that not just in this story, but in sort of all stories, there's always this producer who's behind the scenes putting together, it's like, when I was younger, I'm sure my impression was that Dan Rather is going around knocking on doors and calling up people and they're like, we gotta get the lead. And so I was just fascinated by the process aspect of it, of how stories get put together. And I love the idea of going behind the scenes and sort of going behind the camera and showing people that. Because I love process movies. Like, it's just, sure. So I loved that idea. And then I also loved the idea of being able to make a movie about journalism, because I think we were then, and even more now too, are in such a transitional period where we're sort of still trying to figure out how all of this technology works and how it affects us societally. So all that stuff too, kind of baked into, if we could bake sort of that into the story about this woman, I was like, this could be a really interesting movie. And so and tell me if I'm babbling too much.
No, you're giving the background.
I'm giving the background. And so I went down, long story short, I called Mary up, and she wasn't very interested in doing anything with it, because I think she was still sort of in a defensive crouch a little bit about it. And so I said, look, I'd love to come down there and just talk to you. And if at the end of this you don't want to have anything to do with it, or don't want it, no harm, no foul. And so my wife and I went down to Texas, and my wife is interesting and funny and much cooler than I am. So I was like, the closer is here.
Right.
And they got along really well. And it was like, and sort of we sat in her living room for like 2 days with her and her husband, Mark Romanek, who's also a reporter. And we talked about like everything but what had happened. You know what I mean? Sort of like the elephant in the room. Not that we danced around and pretend it didn't happen, but we talked about how she grew up. We talked about how I grew up. It was just one of those like getting to know you periods. Like, went to dinner. I met her kid. We talked about whether Amber and I were gonna have kids. Like, it was like one of those. And at the end of the 2 days, she was like, you seem like a decent guy. And I was like, no, I'm not. You're wrong. But she was like, if you want to take a run at this, I'm okay with it. So that's kind of how I got into it. But we always knew that, and I was always sort of fascinated about telling this story through her eyes, because she's the one on the ground the whole time. from soup to nuts, from running down the leads to putting it together, to then when it starts to fracture and come apart, I was like, this is the person whose eyes it's most interesting to see the story through.
Sure. So getting back to what I originally said.
Yes, sorry.
But balancing fact and fiction.
Sure, yes.
In all movies, people just lose track of the fact that it's a movie.
Yes.
But this is one of those things where it's based on real life.
Yeah.
So...
No, we had to do. Listen, the movie is absolutely based on her book, and then that was sort of the template, and then you do all this other work. You go out and you talk to a ton of people who are involved in it. You try and talk to people who have differing points of view about it. You know what I mean? Especially with something as controversial, I guess you would say, as this story was. There are going to be people who remember the events differently. There are going to be people who disagree about this or that, or who was in this room at this time, or who said what. And so my goal was to get as much information as humanly possible about it, just so you know what I mean? And then you have to go make the movie, and you have to go make the movie and tell it through your protagonist's eyes. And so my goal was to talk to as many as people I could on and off the record, who were there, who had knowledge of what it was like to work at CBS at the time, what it was like to work in news at the time. Some people knew Mary, some people didn't know Mary, some people knew Dan, some people didn't know Dan, and sort of get everybody's impression, and then you just go and you write the screenplay as best you can, and you tell the story as best you can.
Did you get to talk to Dan prior to filming and maybe work with what he said and add it to the script?
I did, yeah. So one of the first things after we got Mary is I went and saw Dan. And so, first I tried to see Dan, and I had no idea if Dan would respond to, because it is the weirdest thing in the world. It is one of those things where it's like you call somebody up and you're like, I have good news and bad news. The good news is I want to make a movie about you. The bad news is I don't want to make a movie about like your best day. I want to make a movie about the worst thing that's ever happened to you professionally. Sure. Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't it be great to see yourself 40 feet high and your world falling apart again? So I had no idea if he was going to respond, if Mary was going to respond to the idea of doing it or not. But Dan was really great, and he was open, and he'd answer any question you had. He would talk about how he felt. And a lot of it too was, what was your response? Like when you went home, what was your response to this? So, it's like I get what you said in the room, or I get what you said on television. We have that, and it's like we have Dan Rather on TV. We have those tapes, What I'm interested in is, after you step off the stage, what is the conversation about where you are in the story, where. So, and he was great about that. And so was Mary, and so were a lot of other people who were involved in it. And so having that level of cooperation, but also them cooperating in a way where they also knew that at a certain point in time we were going to go away and make the movie we were going to make, and they weren't going to get to have a say in that editorially, was phenomenal. That they would sort of open themselves up to that kind of relationship.
I normally don't ask about the casting process because I really don't care.
Fair enough.
But being honest,
no, absolutely. Yeah.
Because it's
actors wanted to be in the movie.
Yeah, whatever. But I will say you landed Robert Evan Redford and Cate Blanchett, and it's like these are two big actors. So was it tough to land them, and talk a little bit about when the reaction for you on your first movie on getting these two people? Sure.
I think fear, immediate cold. No, it was amazing. It's the thing about making a movie like this is it's a small bullseye. Unfortunately, to get financing for a movie like this.
Was the financing before Cate and Robert? Or
no, it was Cate and Robert were before the financing. So it was the idea was sort of the idea always was the way sort of and tell me if this is boring too, but I spent my own money optioning the book because I was like, I think I could get somebody to buy it for us, but I think that person or that studio would never make the movie. I just think because I think it's a hard movie to make.
Sure.
Get made.
I
was
agree.
like the first rule is never spend your own money. So I went ahead and spent my own money because I'm not a smart man.
Right.
But I was like, if I can control that and if I can write a script that will attract some good talent who will jump off this cliff with me, then I think we have a shot of financing it. So, but I knew I had to get somebody of that ilk, and there aren't that many of that ilk of Cate.
Sure.
Cate's, the actor of her generation. So it's like, but we got the script to Hilda Quealy, Kate's agent, and she read it and she liked it, and she knew some of my other work, and I'd met her I'd written something else that one of her clients had been in and had a good experience. So there was sort of a good relationship there. So she sent it to Kate. She sent it to Kate the morning after she won the Academy Award for Blue Jasmine, which I was like, really?
Right, exactly.
Really? Do you want to do that? Because I'm like, you win your second Oscar, the first thing you want to do is work with a first-time director. I mean, I think that's your next logical step in your career, right? So I was like, there's no way we're going to get her. But she read the script, and she liked it, and we got on the phone, and we had like a 30-minute conversation just about process, and just about sort of, how would you work, how do I work, and I'm... I'm like, I've never directed a movie before, so I guess we're gonna find out.
Right, exactly.
But she was lovely and got off the phone and committed to the movie, and it was just like, what? It was amazing. But then from there,
but once you have her, forget it.
Once you have her, it's like, it's such a wonderful actor magnet, and I knew Robert F. and Redford a little bit,
right?
Because I'd written a movie that he was going to direct, and so we'd spend some time together, not like like fly fishing time together, but like we'd spend some time working together, and I had written Dan for him. In my head, I was like, this would be a great. I mean, I would be so lucky, and so, but I also knew we had to get our Mary first, because his first question would be, okay, but who's the other lead, because it's Mary's film, and so once we had Kate, I just wrote him this letter, and I was basically like, we have Cate Blanchett. Here's why I think could be a great movie. This is the influence. How important All the President's Men was to me and to all of us, and this is a chance to make another film about journalism and that says different things. And I sort of put all of that into a letter and sent it to him. And then I was on it was like a week later, and I was on like a conference call we're talking to financiers, because we were already talking to them because Kate had landed in it. And I got like a blocked number call, which doesn't, you don't get blocked number calls that often anymore, I feel like.
Right.
And so, but I was like, I wonder who that is. And I clicked over, and I hear, hey, Jamie, it's Bob Redford. And I was like, hi, Bob Redford, on my phone.
Right, exactly.
And I was like, hold on, I got to get off the other line. And he's like, oh, what's on the other line? And I said, oh, it's like a financing call for the movie, but let me get rid of him. He's like, oh, no, let me call you right back. I'll call you back in 10 minutes. And he hung up, and I was like, damn it, Robert, So I was like, and so the call ended, and he called me back, and he said, I read the script, and I'd love to do it. Yeah. And I was like, of course you would, Bob Redford, on my phone. So it was an amazing sort of thing. And then once I had both of them, they are such talent magnets, and they are such, and actors want to go and, you want to go spar with Muhammad Ali a couple rounds,
I'm also sure that the financing came together rather quick after
that. Was very helpful. That definitely greased the wheels.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
How long was your first cut compared to the finished film?
First cut was 2:20 something, so about 20 minutes longer.
Now, would you consider that like a cut that could have been released, or was that like an assembly cut?
No, I think it was. I mean, listen, it was in English. It could, but it wasn't the. It was too long, and it was just one of those things about. Pare it down. The script was 135 pages, so it was a very wordy kind of thing. And again, it's a really, not again because I haven't said this before. But it's a really interesting process, because I feel like sometimes you have to actually shoot the scene, cut the scene, look at the scene, and then go, oh yeah, I don't need that. It's like you won't, but you have to actually go through that entire process in order to realize that you don't need something.
Who did you do a friends and family screening?
Yeah.
And were they actually giving you real advice, or did they all say, oh, great job?
No, they gave me real advice, which was great. Because that's also, it's like, the conversation I would have with them is, listen, you are doing me no favors by just giving me a back pat at this point.
Right.
Because, if I'm walking into a propeller, I need to know, I need you not to go, hey, everything's going great. I need you to go, dude, there's your propeller over there if you want to maybe,
Right.
But they were really great about it. And I had, there were a couple people, I started sort of showing it to individuals or a couple people at a time first, really early, just to kind of go, am I crazy? Am I structurally screwed? You know what I mean? Something like that, where it's like, do I need to make the third act the first act? Or anything, just to sort of be on the right track. And I got some really good responses at that period, and some great thoughts, but some responses that were like, no, I think you're going to be okay. I think this is the, you want to keep going down this road or not that road. And then we did Friends and Family. I sort of honed and did it. And then Friends and Family, I think I'd gotten it down to like 215 or something in that neighborhood. And then did that, and then more came out, and it was just, but it was a great process. We had a good long post period, which was because the movie didn't have distribution at the beginning of post, so we actually had more time to get it ready to show it to buyers.
Because I'm going to run out of time with you in a few minutes. No, I want to ask you a few other things.
Sure.
Whatever ended up happening to Murder Mystery and The Shining prequel?
So Murder Mystery continues to have, it's the most amazing, it's actually, we're talking to another director. We don't officially have them signed on yet. And we're talking to an actor. We don't have them officially signed on yet. But that movie has been like this crazy, we have had either, because it's a two-hander, it's a husband and a wife character. We've had the husband and the wife, but no director. We've had the husband and the director, but not the wife. We had the wife and the director, but not the husband. We've had every iteration, possibly, of people attached to this film, and it just, it's like, it's not cursed, but it almost feels, we've gotten so close to shooting this movie so many times. But it looks like as of this week, it looks like it's actually coming back together. So hopefully we won't be here 4 years from now and me going, we're almost there.
Right, exactly.
We're almost there. But it feels like we're in a good place with it. And then The Shining prequel is, we have an amazing script by Glen Mazzara. Mark Romanek is attached to direct, who's, Mark Romanek.
I've heard of him.
We've heard of him. He's pretty incredible. And he's super into it and super in the headspace. And so
he seems like the guy, he's a really good director.
Yeah.
And for me, it's a ballsy project to take on.
Sure, yeah.
So it's you really got to have cojones.
No, you do, and we want, and it's you want a real filmmaker like Mark doing it. You know what I mean? It's so cojones of steel. Apparently, we have. But
right, exactly.
But I think it's honestly, I think people will really be excited about it because it's not, it's not 20 years before The Shining.
Right.
It's I don't want to give too much away about the story, but the way Glenn cracked it and the way Mark has sort of cracked it in a way of it's completely its own film, which I think is super smart because it's not, you know what I mean? It's not like when Scatman Carruthers was young, it's not that, so I think people will really be surprised by it.
One of the things that I found is the bigger the budget, the more hands are in the pot, and the harder it is to get made.
Yes.
Is this one of these projects where you think that it can be made at a $35 million, a $50 million, where it's something where it could actually get off the ground and be left alone to do its own thing?
I don't know. I wouldn't want to discuss it sort of budgetarily at this point, but I certainly think that there is... Mark is, and one of the things that's amazing about him is he's a strong filmmaker with his own convictions, and Mark is going to make the movie Mark is going to make. And
that's both, but that's gotten him in trouble in the past.
It's gotten him in trouble, but that's okay. You know what I mean? It's sort of that's gotten him in trouble, but I also think there's something wonderful about a director who says, no, this is the film, and I'm cool. Fincher was the same way, and Fincher, it's this is the movie I want to make. If you don't want to make that movie, that's totally cool. Then we won't make the movie. You know what I mean? And so and now as someone who's directed a film, that's kind of what you want. You want the captain of the ship to be I know what the film is, I know how to make it, let's go do it.
Yeah, listen, I would love to see him, listen, I want to see him direct anything.
I know, that's the thing. I just want Mark to make films, because that's, you want to watch his work.
You are producing, supposedly, the Suge Knight documentary.
Supposedly, yes. No, the Suge Knight, yeah.
What's the story with that?
So that's something that Brad Fisher, my producing partner, brought in and has been working on for the last, 3.5-4 years almost, and shot stuff with Suge, and Antoine Fuqua directed it, and it's amazing. And it's, but started working on it about 3.5-4 years ago, just out of a love of that period and that history and that, growing up with that music, as he did in, as a white Jewish kid in New Jersey. But that was amazing because that music crossed so many boundaries and that culture did. So, they've been working on it for 3.5 years. I think it's supposed to be, Showtime's doing it, and Showtime's putting it out, I think, in the next couple months. And it's amazing and tragic that Suge came back into the news in such a way, and and I think you're going to be really interested. It's a really interesting piece.
Well,
One last question.
sure. Part A is you
Well played, sir. Well
Right,
played. Tip of the hat.
You would think that with the popularity of Straight Outta Compton,
Sure,
that there would be there's a lot. I'm sure Showtime is even more excited about doing this.
I think they definitely are. Yeah, I think they definitely are.
Okay, so let's tease my last question.
Sure.
You're obviously a prolific screenwriter. What have you been working on? What's getting ready to bubble up?
So there are a couple things I did. I'm just starting to figure out actually what the next thing is. And there's something that I pitched just as a screenwriter to a studio that I can't talk about yet because they're still doing it. I know.
I'm familiar with
I know,
industry.
you know the whole thing. But that I'm really excited about. And then probably the next thing that's going to be in theaters is I worked on the new Independence Day film.
I'm familiar. I've heard of that movie.
Small independent film about aliens attacking. I don't want to ruin anything.
Right, yeah.
Aliens may be coming back in Independence Day too. So
I
heard it here first, kids.
Right, exactly. I'll leave it there and say congratulations on Truth.
Thank you, man. Thank you so much. Good to see you.
Stop.